the PPTs. So.
I mean, it's making good money, but
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure.
Right,
It's a good experience.
yeah, no, for sure. So,
All right. Hello. I'm Matt. Oh, cool. Oh, sure, it's
hey
fine with
Jake.
me. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Hey,
That's okay.
So, you're doing travel now. Okay. Since Braden's kind of MIA for a little bit. Yeah. Okay. So we're gonna handle that. I'm gonna start sending you some stuff probably tomorrow. Okay. Maybe. I'll try to get it. Yeah.
Are you guys having
How much is left? Not that much. It's more just getting the signatures, getting the rest of the forms put out. Nick, I was thinking, you're pretty familiar with filling out direct pay forms. If I send you the information, can you make like 8 of them? Direct pay forms for the registration fees that we all paid. I'll send you a spreadsheet that's got like the people's addresses and stuff. And you can get with that. So
I was gonna ask you.
Yeah.
Is there a professional visiting from the circle today? Are you aware?
I don't think so today. Or
Okay.
at least not that I've
I know
heard.
we were
Sometimes they just kind of show unannounced. So.
We were trying to get someone to come to each one, but I didn't hear.
Oh yeah.
Hey, how you doing? Good to see you, man. So,
You all right?
yeah, hanging in there. How about yourself?
Okay. Busy as always.
Oh, I'm sure. So, well, I appreciate you for coming in and speaking and everything. So, yeah, it's always nice to come and talk.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
students appreciate it.
Happy to do it. It's always usually fun privileges.
Okay.
Come back up here.
Yeah.
See you and forth growing and stuff.
Yeah. We always got something going on here.
There's always something.
Good. I'll probably have to cut out before your speech and everything, but I at least want to come by and say hi and tell you things and everything. So. All right, man. I'll see you. Yeah. So, any exciting news from United?
Hey Tori, can you think of anything else that I'm missing up here? Yes, volleyball. Good point.
And then the other thing, if you're the hockey or something,
Yeah. Yeah, my only concern with we'll see.
We would need to graduate about 80 jobs. Yeah, so.
Not January 1st.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little quiet, so I'm just like adjusting it. Into like
Yeah. Well, I mean, it probably gave them a good perspective. Working your way up, they've got a good
Just you, Tori. Hey, I can make a very nice girl. Hey, man. I mean, I didn't want to say it, but I knew where you were thinking. Touchy subjects. What? Thought you were, food? Oh, yeah, I assume it's on its way. Marshall texted me, so. Oh, there we go. Busy this time of day for a half hour. What's that? Busy. Half hour earlier.
Yeah.
So how was checking back? It's actually, I kind of broke the rules on this. It's actually part of it. Yeah, I was like, well, I'll do that. And I was like, how about this? More tacos. Okay. Yeah, they didn't give us any. I assume the closet's still open? Okay, cool. Well, once we get those, we'll get it started in just a second. Is this working? Hello, hello, hello? What'd you do? Hmm? What? Is that really loud? I'm gonna start beatboxing. If you put it where? On top of this plate. Like that? How about we just let it hang off? Oh, yes. Is that okay? Can't hang?
It's direct.
So, that's why I came up here earlier.
Well, it's just Matt. He could just hold it.
Well, no, it will still work. I was just trying to get in a spot where it's like, there. I'm gonna do it like that. That'll work.
Cool.
Yeah, we always have one partner who just save everything to the end, and then you get like 2 or 3 people with like massive fire extinguishers the last day. You probably got stuff. That was you last year. Yeah, that's what I heard. Well, he retired last year, so we're hopefully gonna buck that trend
You ready?
faster. But
Are you hungry? Nice to meet you. Hey, there we go. The real MVP. All right, so I think we're going to go ahead and get started. We got some great looking Qdoba over there. Something Qdoba doesn't want you to know, on their catering menu, they only have taco bars and burrito bars. And I didn't want that, so I was like, can I just order 51 tacos ahead of time? And they reluctantly said yes, so here we are. But along with that, it's not a whole lot to go over today. Just here's some upcoming dates. So for those who were at the last officer meeting, you might remember this. We talked about the Becker Trivia Night, and that's going to be on March 14th at 6:30 p.m. It's going to be following an officer meeting, I think. And then, following an officer meeting. And that's going to be really cool because we have like the Becker representative coming in, and it's going to be a trivia where we actually use the Becker software, like to show the questions and that sort of thing. And again, we're pending approval, or at least the Becker representative is, that the winner would receive a full set of Becker course materials. So that is pending approval. Don't hold me to that, but I'm really hoping. I've really been pushing it. So, but yes, that'll be a really fun event. Good way to test your CPA knowledge, and there'll be other prizes and stuff too. Along with that, we've got the Warwick County 4-H pork chop dinner, which I had a sign-up sheet last meeting for that, but I'm going to send this around again. It's a good community service opportunity, good way to get some hours in. And that is March 16th from 5 to 7. Yeah, so I'm going to pass this around. And then on the back side of this paper, there's a volleyball sign-up sheet. So if you want to play volleyball for Beta Alpha Psi's intramural team, you should sign up. Specifically, if 2 girls in here would please join the team so that we can have a team. I'm looking at the 4, 5 that are in here. So, yeah. Then yeah, BAP regional meetings come up at the end of March. Looking way out, we got Meet the Firms on April 16th. And we have Holly's House Industry Tour. And then here's the other meeting dates in case you need a reminder. Other than that, oh, there's that. So, need volleyball players. So if you're good at volleyball, yeah, if you have a basic understanding of what a volleyball is, then you're welcome. That's fine, you know. If you want to dress up in some pigtails too, you know. Yeah, okay. Works for me. So yeah. The volleyball, yeah, so it's Tuesday, Thursdays, and the times that we'll be playing is gonna like range, like we could play as early as like 8:45, or we could play as late as like 10:20. So it's just depends on, you know, the luck of the draw and what times we get. But they will be Tuesday, Thursday. I did that thinking that it'd probably be best, you know, since we're already here this evening for the Beta Alpha Psi meeting anyway. Can roll right into that. And then we were talking about putting a floor hockey team together. And this one is specifically like there's a guys league and a girls league. So we'd be looking to put a guys league together. And on that sheet that's going around too, there's also a spot that says floor hockey if you want to put your name on that as well. And we'll kind of gauge the interest on that and see if we can get a team together. The only issue with that is it might conflict with the volleyball times. So we'll see. Because volleyball is a little greater than floor hockey. I know you're shaking your head, but we'll see. Yeah. All right. And beyond that, Beta Alpha Psi dues and contracts were due last professional meeting, but we will be making an exception. If you did not get it in at that time, you can turn it in today. This will be the last opportunity to turn it in. And yeah, dues are $30. And if you need a contract, I've got a few, I think I got a couple extra. And that does it. So with that, Qdoba.
Oh, I'm just getting a drink. Go ahead.
All right.
Although I should eat some.
You're going to play volleyball, right? Yeah, that's right, you are.
You're damn right.
I'm thinking about I like to be active.
Oh,
But I
yeah.
also know that
So
it's
much
not like
fun.
a whole workout. It's just
Nah,
like,
it's good though, you know?
maybe I could work out before and then go.
You could.
We'll work out after. Because you
No,
don't want to go into
I'd
the
rather have a
entire.
bedtime.
You don't want to go into the entire.
How's everything going?
Going good, how about you?
Yeah, going pretty good. You need anything?
I don't think so. You can't sign stuff yet, can you?
I could sign the Beta Alpha Psi certificates. I have those.
Okay.
that I
Oh,
have-
do you?
Yeah,
Oh, cool.
I'll need to get those to you. But
Sweet.
I have to check my status as a financial officer. I still
Okay.
don't know if Dr. McGuire put that through yet or not. I've asked
Okay.
him.
Because you're a little easier to get a hold of than Dr. McGuire.
Yeah, I've asked him like 13 times to take care of it. And it hasn't. So my expectation is probably not. But
Yeah.
usually, if you come and bring me something, I can go down there and get it done right away.
Okay,
I just barge
cool.
into his office. And
That
have him
sounds
do it.
good. We're like getting pretty close to being able to have everything ready to start submitting for travel
Okay.
and all that. So we're a little later on. We want to break had some family stuff go down. So they rescheduled that. So
Usually, if you can get it there 3 weeks before you leave, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we're pushing it a little bit, but it should be able to get it
yeah, I
taken.
definitely want to get it in, like preferably maybe middle next week, the latest.
Yeah.
Kind of thing, so.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Cool.
All
I
right.
mean, if McGuire's not here, we can just put your signature on it.
Yeah.
If it works, and like, hey, and then we'll know, right?
We'll figure out a way to do it. I mean, there's ways to get it expedited. I mean, I think the provost still has to sign it, but
Yeah,
I can-
yeah, that still has to get there.
he's another one I can just barge into his office and demand that he does something.
Hey, that's great. I'll take that.
All right.
Hey, cool. Are you heading out? Okay, cool.
I'll see you.
Have a good one.
Jesse, how's it going? Yeah, you too. Brutal.
Yeah? Yeah, you're going back.
Yeah.
Killing us.
Pretty bad. We'll get through it. We always do.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to it. So, I guess
You just
software is all that way, or?
It's kind of iffy, but they keep coming out with new guidance. Even Washington's like clarifying positions as of February.
Yeah, it's like late in the game, but
Okay. I'm done here.
it's not fun though. Have you seen an overall benefit?
For the most part, yeah. So, what most people don't understand is they can get most of the benefit throughout the year because they've had less with the health paycheck. So they're expecting the same refund. Like, how come my refund's lower? I thought rates were supposed to go down. It's like, well, you've got bigger paychecks throughout the year.
Just in case.
Yeah,
We're focused on that refund.
yeah.
Like,
That's
how
all.
much is that refund?
I think it'll benefit probably 90%.
Yeah, I mean, to increase the standard deduction at least.
Yeah.
Help a lot. I know I'm looking forward to it. I don't mind photography companies, so.
Oh yeah.
I'm typically paying like, I've never done that, honestly. I'm always just paying.
Well, because you no withholding, right?
Yeah, no holding.
What's what here? There's names on the front. Oh, are there? Okay. Okay, we got one of those.
I don't want to know that I'm gonna have to go through tax season and then have another test I have to retake, you know? I just did it. It is, yeah. And really massive. You're like,
Oh, yeah, the ones I think we got.
yeah. They
So what, you guys go someplace different or bring someplace different?
Oh, yeah.
Each meeting?
Yeah, we tried
It's not
to.
pizza every time anymore?
It used to, yeah, I got to the point where it just used to like every meeting. And we're like, oh, we gotta do something different. So now we like get like Qdoba, and like typically our last meeting of the year, we get it all garden.
Oh, nice.
And, yeah, we'll show all out. You know, already transient, we got Taco Bell,
Really?
yeah.
I cannot imagine that. Like, they tweet out, like, my
Oh,
phone is
yeah.
really
See,
tweeting
he's
your
there
scores
now,
for me,
right?
so I just turn on notifications. So now I feel like that's like such a luxury to know when your scores are
Yeah.
released. But since because they redid it all because of tax reform, and they had a lot of changes, I think. So I took bar in July, and I didn't get my score until September. So I took audit in between that. And it's just
You ready to go?
It's just yeah, I don't think we have a.
I would just check it online, like if you didn't know when it's released.
I don't think we have a clicker or anything, but you can kind of like hold the mouse and.
Yeah, where's, okay, it's over here. I got you.
Yeah, and then this is going to be recording you too.
Do I need to put this on?
No, no.
It's just kind of up here? Okay.
Yeah,
Okay, I'll try to
so-
stand
So that'll be good.
sort of near it.
Yeah.
Okay.
The mouses.
I was gonna say, or you can get like a wireless mouse. University should get a wireless mouse, I should say.
Hey Austin, do you have a wireless mouse?
I mean, that's okay, I'll just use the keyboard. Have big deal.
Oh,
It's no big deal.
well, for yours.
Well, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, BAP, for having me back. Some of you may remember me from maybe 2 years ago, but maybe a lot of you don't. Was anybody here? Does anybody remember that? Yeah, I know Jesse. Okay. So we have two guests tonight from BKD. You guys want to introduce yourselves?
I'm Paige McClellan. I just graduated from USI last April, so I was actually in Beta Alpha Psi all 4 years. And I did 2 tax internships at BKD, and then I just started full-time in September.
And I'm Derek Adams. I've been out of school a lot longer. I graduated from USI back in '03 and have been with BKD ever since. So we're enjoying lovely tax season right now, but always happy to come out and see USI again.
Yeah. So Derek and I are on the USI accounting circle together and have been for probably about 10 years, I would guess. And oddly enough, Derek was our visitor last time I presented, so he gets to see this all over again. But anyway, thanks for having me out, guys. You know, Beta Alpha Psi, interestingly enough, Derek, I don't know if you remember this or not, but I think it was starting maybe my senior year, so you probably didn't even probably exist when you were graduating. So, although we graduated pretty close together. So, who am I? What do I do? So I work for United Companies. If you're familiar with the Romaine College of Business, Ron Romaine is our president, United Companies. So hopefully you guys get to meet him one day. He's a pretty cool guy. He's second generation ownership of United Companies, which is made up of 3 primary companies. I'll walk you through here real quick. But I thought I'd talk a little bit about what our company does, and I'll go through sort of my career, which has been a little bit different than what you may think of, what an accountant may do or what you may do with an accounting degree. So hopefully that'll give you guys some ideas of what you may do with your careers. But United Leasing and Finance is sort of our mothership company, founded over 50 years ago. And really what we do, we're a non-bank. We don't take deposits, but we make loans to commercial companies. We do leases for large fleets of vehicles. So you've got some pictures down here. If you ever worked out at a Planet Fitness, we've financed most of those. So we do all sorts of essential business use asset type of financing. And what kind of separates us from a bank is a number of things. One, we will finance assets that a lot of times banks aren't comfortable with. A lot of times banks will just finance real estate or homes or maybe a car you go buy at a car lot. But businesses have a pretty big need for other financing for things that they do. We understand those niches that they operate in, so we finance those. We've had a lot of growth. I've been with the company for close to 7 years now. I think we've doubled in size roughly in the time I've been there, which is pretty cool. A lot of challenges. We've hired a lot of people, which is really cool. With record sales originations over the last 5+ years. Actually, I should probably put a plus behind that there. So that's United Leasing. PTI, so Jesse interned for PTI. He could probably tell you all about it and what it's like over there. It's a little bit, I always call it a bit chaotic because it's a 24/7, 365 business. And people are always, I find, kind of amazed to learn that this company exists, and 2, that it's headquartered in Evansville. But really the nature of the business is, you see there's a van down there. We have vans and SUVs, and it's somewhat like an Uber in that we'll go pick up these crews primarily on railroads and take them to their next destination spot. So Jesse, did you get involved with any of that in the billing side, or where were you interning? You doing everything? Yeah.
Everything from booking the trips,
Yeah.
testing businesses, to figuring out how to outsource the cabs if we ran out of drivers.
Yeah. So just thousands and thousands of trips, millions of miles per year that we do. So we're operating all across the United States. We service all the major railroads. So due to government regulations, if you are conducting a train, you can't go drive yourself home afterwards. If you've been working for 8 hours or longer. It's kind of like if you're a pilot of an airplane, similar rules such exist. So we'll go to the middle of nowhere and pick people up, and it's very logistics, technology based, as you can imagine, somewhat like Uber or Lyft would be. One of the main differences, though, that the trips that we take tend to average over 100 miles. So they're longer trips. They may take multiple hours to do. And gosh, I think we do maybe 3,000 trips a day, something like that. We have, probably 4,000 vehicles in the fleet, something like that. So it's a pretty large operation. We have 6,000 or 7,000 employees at that business. So it's challenging. If anybody wants to come intern for PTI, can let me know. It's pretty interesting, honestly. And then the other one you may be more familiar with if you're from Evansville or Terre Haute. We own 2 car dealerships. And so people, when they hear Romaine, they tend to think, oh, it's, you know, I see Amy Romaine on the commercials and you guys sell cars. And honestly, we do that, and it's the smallest of our entities. That's, people tend to think of us as that. So about me, I graduated just a little bit after Derek in 2005. And I started with a tax internship at Harding Szymanski. Is anybody going to go work at Harding or BKD when they graduate? Anybody know yet? If you're interning there right now, you're probably not here. Most likely you're probably working. So that's kind of how I got my start in tax, doing personal tax returns, and graduated in 2005 from USI. And then shortly after that, started with Harding Szymanski full time. And a little bit maybe unique, I don't know if they do this as much anymore, but I got to do tax and audit during my time there, which I really enjoyed. I started out pretty heavy in the tax side and then eventually shifted into audits. And what I would do is I would go out and typically audit and prepare their tax return, or have someone with me preparing the tax return. So that was kind of neat. Just got to see all sides of my clients that way, and just sort of handle the entire account when I did that. So, people always ask me, should I do tax or should I do audit? It's kind of a personal choice. I honestly kind of enjoyed doing both, which, I don't know. Derek, is that an odd statement?
It is. Tax is way better.
You see, there you go. 2007, got my CPA license. That felt very good to get done. Paige just found out she passed her last piece, so congrats to her. Yeah. It's very intense studying for that. Hopefully you guys all do it someday and get your license as well. Highly recommend it. It is tough, so you got to really focus in on it. And so shortly after that, the next year, I had an opportunity with a client who was a veteran here in town to come work for them. They offered me a position, and I thought, well, I like public accounting, but maybe a publicly traded company going private sounded kind of interesting to me at the time, and I thought kind of broaden my experience a bit and go do that. So I came on to Vectren as a senior accounting analyst. Honestly, interestingly enough, they sort of gave me a lot of the accounting things that were maybe complicated or people didn't want to do. And I just sort of said, sure, I'll take that on and do them. And so things like restricted stock, just the gap around that's sort of complicated. The tracking of it's very complicated. And so I just sort of said yes to a lot of things. And because of that, I got a lot of kind of neat experience when I was at Vectren. I got to do some of the SEC reporting. We had somebody that really wasn't my job. Somebody went out on maternity leave and they said, who can do this? And I said, I'll give it a try. And so they let me do that, and I got to do that for about 6 months or so. Really not that long, but a really cool experience. And then just consolidations. I really focused a lot on using my skills in Excel at that time. This is back over 10 years ago, but just to automate processes, which at that time the company didn't have. Everything was very, very manual. People were typing stuff into spreadsheets constantly. They weren't really dumping stuff out of reports and having it automatically load into spreadsheets so they can do analysis. And so during my time, I tried to implement a lot of those things, which saved a lot of time. So when you're willing, this will tie into my presentation later, but when you're willing to say yes to things that nobody else wants to do, and you get to do those, they ask you to do new things. So I was promoted after a couple of years into management, and they moved me at that time into regulatory accounting, which is sort of the unique niche that they've got if you work for a utility. So I started supervising people, managing people, overseeing regulatory filings, and then shortly thereafter they had a need back in tax, and they said, Matt, we want you to move back in tax. And I said, well, I haven't done that in a few years, but sure, I'll give it a try. And so moved back into tax at that time in 2010. And again, I tried to focus on automation. That was just sort of a niche that I had, I guess, within the company. But for me, that was just a lot of fun. Doing tax returns are great. Doing tax journal entries is fine, but for me, kind of adding some value is sort of neat. So I created this new database that tracked all these historical deferred tax positions. If you know what that means, it's not very exciting, but it's something we didn't have, and we had deferred tax positions going back 20 years or whatever. And so people were really losing track of where we stood on things. It was just really challenging. So I created some automated reporting out of that database. And with that, as I kind of dove into it, I found that we have lost sight of some of our deferred tax positions, which resulted in approximately $10 million refund that the company received from the IRS. So that was sort of a neat win that I got out of one of those projects I did. What's that? I got zero of that. Yeah, I got to go up. Interestingly, Carl Chapman, our president at the time, you know, I was a young manager, and so I hardly ever saw the president, or really, honestly, even the CFO. Like, those guys are top level. So that was really cool exposure for me because our head controller, who oversaw, you know, 50 plus accountants, you know, brought me up to Carl's office and said, you know, here's what Matt did, and just wanted to introduce you to him and make sure you know the good work he's doing. So it's pretty cool. You know, you do tend to get recognized in these companies when you do things like that. So it was neat. But no, I joked. I said, what's my bonus going to be this year? And I said, no, you're not getting any of this refund. Sorry. But we're happy you did it. And then the other thing too, you know, when I came into this tax group, I was managing about 3 or 4 people, and they had been with the company for some time, and just kind of doing the same stuff over and over and over again. And so I encourage you, anytime you start a new job, to kind of look at things with fresh eyes and think about, you know, why are they doing it this way, or does this even make sense? And you know what I found, again, through just some very simple Excel automation, just dumping reports out into Excel, having Excel do the calculations that they were doing manually, we cut our close time down in half. So it went from about, you know, 2 or 3 days down to about a half a day, roughly. And so actually at the time, these employees were pretty stressed out. They were working a bunch of extra hours. So it was a great thing for them. It reduced the hours they were working back to kind of normal hours. So oddly enough, the last thing, I have some friends that still work there. I said, you guys still using those old spreadsheets I made? They said, oh yeah, we're still using them. So it's kind of cool. December 2010, finished my MBA here back out at USI. So I came back out to USI, and at that time they didn't have any online courses. So I was working full time and heading out here at night to take night classes while I was at Vectron, and finished my MBA, which I really enjoyed. Encourage you all to think about that if you're ever wanting to go into management in your career. It definitely rounds you out, I think, as an accountant or finance or whatever business person. It adds some different perspective. Probably the biggest thing I got out of the MBA program was that just working with peers in different businesses. You know, there's people from Berry Plastics or Sabic or whatever else in these classes, and so the course material, at first when I looked at it, I was like, this is kind of the same as undergrad, similar concepts or the same concepts, but in the courses, you know, it's all about the discussions, the presentations, and that's where I really learned a lot, because I'd say, well, here's how I do something in my company, and you know, Derek would raise his hand and say, well, I do that totally differently, and here's what I do, and here's why. And so just a lot of cool sort of networking and feedback that I got through that program. And then, interestingly, so 2012, I mentioned I was on the USI Accounting Circle. At that time, there was a guy named John Shank on the Accounting Circle, and I knew John had met him through the community over time, and he said, I'm leaving United Companies. I got this offer as a CFO. It's a great promotion for me. I'm going to go work for this bank. And I said, well, who's taking your job? And he said, I don't know, but you know, Rick Schultz, who has been my boss, is looking for somebody. And I just happened to know Rick once again through the community. And so I ended up reaching out to him and saying, well, I kind of knew what John did, and that sounded really interesting, and I'd like to maybe look at coming to work for you. And so he said, well, you're like a tax guy, right? I don't know if I want to hire you as my director of financial planning and business analysis. That sounds like it's a mismatch, you know. And so as we talked about it, and he kind of learned about sort of my diverse background, he said, okay, I'll give you a shot, and we'll see how this goes. So it was a big leap for me, and honestly a little bit scary. I had a nice track career going at Vectron, but I kind of felt like this would really challenge me at a whole different level in a way. So honestly, I don't have a bachelor's in finance. Honestly, I had very little finance background. I kind of worked with our finance department a little bit, just side by side at Vectron, but beyond that, I knew I was going to have to jump in and just learn a lot very, very quickly. So a little bit scary, but it all worked out great, and I'm really happy that I made that leap. So some of the things I got to do in that position, like it says, manage bank relationships. So we were putting together these large credit facilities with banks like Bank of America, US Bank, Wells Fargo, some of the very big names, negotiating covenants. So it was a whole different kind of skill set for me as related to, you know, having to be persuasive with people, et cetera. interest rate risk, FX risk, and then kind of one of the fun things for me, and this is my department that I was overseeing at the time, just doing projections, budgeting, more of the strategic planning of the company we were involved in. And because of that, I got to be involved in mergers and acquisitions. So we've acquired some companies over time. I was sort of the lead on those that would look at the company and put together the analysis, or my team would help me do that, and we'd say, yeah, let's buy this company, or no, let's not buy this company for various reasons. So that's some pretty neat high-level stuff that I was not expecting to get to do, especially at this point in my career. But sometimes those things come up, and you want to seize those opportunities. So was promoted a few years after that to senior director with that. Came back in the accounting world. The accounting department came underneath me at that time. Sort of broadened my scope of my job a bit. And then most recently, this past December, was promoted to something entirely different in business development. So anybody know what business development is? There's kind of a vague title. It's basically sales. So people are, it's funny, probably about 3 years before this promotion, Ron and Amy used to joke, one of these days we're going to have you come run our sales group. And I would kind of laugh, and I'm like, yeah, right, I'm not going to ever do that. And then after about 3 years, we were talking more and more. It's like, well, this probably makes some sense. And so, how do you go from accounting and finance to managing sales? How is that even possible? But really through a lot of these experiences, working face-to-face with our banks, and a lot of that is just negotiation. That's honestly what sales is, being persuasive. It's having those soft skills. It's using those, developing relationships. And so I did a lot of that in my prior roles, as well as just having a really, really strong finance and accounting background. That's honestly what we do in United Leasing and Finance. We're selling financial products to commercial customers. So that's a pretty new role for me. So I'll be responsible for our management of our commercial lenders. I now have sales goals every month that my team needs to try to hit, so I'm trying to oversee those. But really, just trying to guide the strategic direction, beef up some of our marketing materials, so I get to work with marketing a lot. So just kind of a whole new thing for me in the last few months, which has been pretty cool. So with that, what have I learned? And I've sprinkled some of this in throughout, but say yes to work, projects, promotions, even if they scare you. So I kind of mentioned that thing where the girl was on maternity leave. I was approached by our director at the time, and he said, I really need somebody to do this SEC reporting, and do you have any interest? At first I told him no, just because I was so busy, with work. And then he came back to me about a week later, and he said, I think you need to rethink this. And I said, okay, I'll do it, basically. And I was happy that I did. So, a lot of my career could have been completely different if I didn't say yes to things and these promotions. I absolutely could have said no to this recent promotion. I could have stayed where I am for another, 5-6 years when our CFO retires, take his job, and just kind of do that for the rest of my career if I wanted to. But I thought it would be cool to kind of get more well-rounded experience. Doesn't mean I can't be a CFO in the company or be the president of the company or whatever I want to do, but I thought, this is something that I need to see, I need to learn. So always be thinking in that mindset if you want to be challenged. And kind of with that, always be operating just outside of your comfort zone. That's something that the president of Harding Szymanski at the time told me when I was probably like a first-year staff. And I don't really remember why I was even talking to him at the time. Maybe I had a client of his or something, and he just randomly told me that. He's like, Matt, you could do a lot with your career if you want, but you're not, you're going to be, much smaller if you don't, always challenge yourself to be, things are scary. Be a little bit scared, be outside your comfort zone. So I tried to always remember that, not be too comfortable anytime, always be challenging myself. The next one here, so accounting requires technical skills, but leadership is all about soft skills. This is something, certainly when I was sitting in your seats, that I don't even know if I would have known what that meant, to be honest with you, but something that I've learned over time. And early on in your career, hopefully you'll take the CPA exam, you'll do whatever, if you're an accounting major, and you really are going to be focused on becoming an expert at taxes or becoming an expert in audit or whatever it is, building a financial statement. And that's great. You want to do that certainly early on in your career, build those technical skills. But eventually, if you're thinking, I want to be in management, I want to be something else, that's really where the soft skills come into play. And I really didn't even know that when I got promoted into management. People said, oh, we think you have a good personality for this or whatever. But as I've managed people who have kind of grown up and become managers themselves, that's the number one thing that I focus in on them with. Every year we kind of have goals for my employees, and the ones that say, yeah, I want to work up into management, I kind of say, well, you're already smart. You already have technical skills. You got a good GPA or whatever. You pass the CPA exam. It's like, we need to work with you on, you know, your social skills or your interpersonal skills or whatever it is, being able to communicate, being able to speak in public, you know, being assertive if you're kind of more of a reserved person. You know, that's pretty typical for accountants and finance people. Maybe you're naturally a little more shy or more reserved. You know, I certainly am too, even though I'm up here speaking to you guys, probably naturally a bit more reserved. But, you know, I find that the people that are willing to take that to heart and work on those things, really, it's just amazing what they accomplish, and they kind of come into management and become much better managers. Over the years, I've seen people fail at management because they haven't developed soft skills. They just think I'm going to be the expert of whatever it is I'm managing. And then, you know, it just doesn't work out. People quit, they don't work well with other managers, and it's just sort of a recipe for disaster. So over your careers, you'll likely have bosses that have these leadership traits or soft skills, and you'll probably really enjoy working for those people. And I can guarantee you also have some bosses that are just technical experts in their field. And sometimes they're good people and they're good to work for, but a lot of times it's very challenging. They don't communicate well, or you have trouble communicating with them, knowing their needs. So just think about that and sort of challenge yourselves. Hopefully you guys are in Toastmasters. I strongly recommend that. I did not do that when I was a student, and I wish that I had. And so I take these opportunities to speak and practice, which is really my next bullet point here. Never stop working on your communication and public speaking skills. Oddly enough, now that I'm over the sales team, you know, these are incredibly outgoing people. You know, they're by nature, they're somewhat type A, very outgoing, love talking to people. However, they're not always getting up and presenting to customers. They maybe do that every so often, get out in front of a customer, do a PowerPoint presentation, present. Some of them have more experience than others. And so we're actually challenging them all to do kind of these presentations to myself and our president internally. And what we're finding is some of them are very uncomfortable doing it, believe it or not. They've not had a ton of experience doing presentations or communicating even in front of a small group, and they get really nervous about it, just like anybody does with public speaking. And so the more of that you do, I mean, the less nervous that you get, the more polished you become, the less uhs that you'll say. Toastmasters loves to tell me how many uhs that I have in my presentations. It's never good. So my next point is find a mentor. If you work for like a large company, you may get assigned a mentor, which is kind of cool. So those companies that do that well, that's a great feature to them. But a lot of times you won't. You know, you may go work for a smaller company or whatever, but try to find somebody that's, you know, maybe a bit older than you, maybe a bit more experienced that you trust, and then, you know, someone who's not your boss, preferably, and just ask them. You know, don't be afraid to say, you know, hey, you know, would you be interested in mentoring me? Can I go to lunch with you every month or whatever it is? And oftentimes I find that people are very willing to do that. They want to help you out in your career. So through a mentor, I mean, you can just learn so much. You can bounce ideas off of them that you may be afraid to with your boss or your coworkers. You can talk about career aspirations. You know, interestingly enough, I've had mentors in the past that I've reached back out to and said, you know, hey, I'm thinking about taking this job at United Companies. What do you think? You know, and having that, I mean, it's amazing, just feedback that you'll have. You know, so when you do become an expert in your area, so let's say you are like Paige and you go into tax, and eventually you become a tax supervisor or whatever it is, and you start reviewing returns and you really become an expert at tax. What I've found is the next step is start developing the people beneath you. It's going to be really challenging for you, one, to manage a team that when people aren't being developed, people will tend to leave, they'll get bored, they'll get frustrated, but also it's going to be harder for you to get promoted within your company if you don't have good people that are rising up beneath you. So sometimes I've seen managers honestly almost be fearful of developing people because I don't know if they think, well, this guy's going to take my job someday. I'm not really sure what that mentality is. But I have always found, you know, 100% of the time it's a very, very good thing. Those people become stronger. You can give them more difficult work. And then eventually you say, yeah, you know, Jesse here is ready to take my job, I'm ready for the next thing. And then the company thereby can say, well, you're right, he is ready, and we can move you on or promote you. So it's just a great thing to do. And then lastly, get involved in your community. So obviously I mentioned I'm a USI Accounting Circle, have been for some time, but I've been on several nonprofit boards here in town. I'm currently on the board for the Big Brothers Big Sisters, sitting as vice president for that board. And one, obviously, it's giving back to your community, which I'm very big proponent of, strongly recommend that to everybody here. I think you guys do a service project, right, through BAP? Something like that, yeah. So that's that's an example of that, but really, you're gonna be busy in your job, especially if you're working in public accounting, if you're studying the CPA, but really try to early on get involved, find a board, even if it's just a committee of a board or whatever. And again, it's networking. You will work with amazing people on these nonprofit boards. You'll meet people. You'll really get more well-rounded. You'll be challenged in different ways. You'll learn skills you can take back to your companies and your career. So that's something I always try to push on people. I want really all of my employees to be on boards if they can. And several of my employees are. Not all of them. Not all of them have taken that to heart. Some are saying, I'm too busy. I've got kids, or I've got this or that going on. But really challenge yourselves. You'll find a way to make it work, at the end of the day. So I know I kind of breezed through a lot of this stuff quickly, and somewhat by design. Last time around, we had a lot of questions and discussion, which I thought was fun. So I wanted to leave some time for you guys to do that. So hopefully we'll have some here. So what do you guys think? What questions do you have for me? Sort of a different career path, that I've taken. Derek's taken a different career path than I have, and not to say one's better than the other, certainly not. But you may think, wow, I didn't realize that these are things that accounting can afford me, or things I may get to do. So, what do you guys think? Is that interesting, Jesse?
How are you enjoying your sales position now?
It's good. I enjoy it a lot. So, how does my past experience relate? I went out, and I don't do this. I don't travel terribly a lot, but I went out to one of our larger customers and met with them. And really, I spent a lot of time just meeting with the president. And we talked a lot about the strategy of the company, where the company is going, what are their pain points financially, cash flow wise. So those are all things as a CPA and accountant, I can have these very high level conversations with them with. I mean, public accounting somewhat trained me for that, but also just in the other elevator roles I've had really trained me for that. So that's where this, the customer or the client or whoever is saying, wow, this is a great value add for me. We can talk about the financing needs I have, how that makes sense, what's the best option route that I have. So it's been fun. I mean, those things I enjoy. And again, it is, you do want to add new business, make sales per se, but it's really about finding kind of the win-wins for the company as well as the customers. So, yeah, that's good. One day I might recruit you, Jesse, into sales. You never know. Yeah. Well, really, the best lenders, if you're a banker, if you're a commercial lender, whatever it is, tend to have finance and accounting backgrounds, because lending is all about, in my opinion, credit. It's not just about finding the opportunity of a guy that says, "Oh, I've got 100 vehicles. Can you lease them to me?" Well, if the guy can't pay you in a year or two, that's a problem. You're going to lose money on that. You're going to have to repossess all those assets, try to remarket them and sell them. It's not a good situation. So we have a very strong credit department and team. And if you're a salesperson, if you get those financial statements from the customer and you can look at them and say, this is a great opportunity. They're strong. They've got strong equity, great cash flow. I can run some covenants quickly. Leverage makes sense. Write up a great reason why we should finance this new customer. Send that on to credit. You're probably going to get that deal done. Now, if you're a salesperson that gets that information and says, well, I don't know the difference between a compilation and an audit, and I don't know anything about this tax return and these accelerated depreciation that he's taking on the return. I don't even know what this means, and you just send it up to credit, and it's garbage. You just wasted a ton of your time. So this is where I'm working closely with the sales team. A lot of them do have finance backgrounds or accounting backgrounds, but the ones that don't, I'm spending a lot more time with essentially training them. It's good stuff. What do you guys think? Everybody else? How many accounting majors do we have? Is that everybody? Wanted to make sure I wasn't speaking too narrowly here. So is anyone thinking about the CPA exam? So most of you. That's good. So it's tough. I don't know. Anybody have any questions? You can probably ask Paige. She may have.
I don't want to talk about it anymore.
Yeah, for me, I've forgotten enough of what the pain is like. Yeah. Yeah, so thankfully, when I was taking the CPA exam. Yeah, so when I was at the accounting firm, they paid for my review materials, and they paid for, at that time, each section they would pay for once. So you're highly incentivized to pass them on your first try, which thankfully I did. But it was great. I mean, at that time I took Becker, and it's funny, as I was putting this together, and I was typing, graduated in 2005, I was thinking, man, these guys were like little kids in 2005 for the most part. But, back in 06, 07, when I was taking the exam, I took Becker, and that was a great course at that time. That was considered kind of the premier. I'm not sure if it still is or not, but really helped me focus in on what they thought would be tested on. And I just, got down and worked all day and studied all night, and, passed it, so it was great. Yeah. Yeah. That's funny. That's the big question that I always tend to get when I come out to USI and give a speech. And it's funny. And no, that's a great question, because you hear that a lot, especially as a student, I'm sure. And my employees sometimes come to me, I'm thinking about getting a license. Do I get a CPA? Do I get a CMA? Honestly, my opinion is one's not necessarily better than the other. However, from an external perspective, you will find that almost everybody in the U.S., I guess at least, knows what a CPA is, and nobody knows what a CMA is. So if you're going to go, let's just say you get your CMA, and even if your company pays for it, then you want to go work somewhere else, that new company may be like, what on earth is a CMA? Even like the accountants sometimes may say that. So I've run across, I think, 2 or 3 in my entire career that have CMAs. And honestly, if you're going to do it, a lot of times what I see is people have been working in accounting for a while, they're not in public accounting, and they're like, well, I really want to raise up to the next level, maybe go into management, prove I know my skills is really what that is. And so they'll take the CMA to do that. And they and a lot of times they feel, well, this will be more applicable to what I know. And that's very true. It really is, most likely. So I don't discourage you at all from taking the CMA. Just think about what your long-term career goals are. If I go out to a customer, like I said, in sales, and my business card says CPA, they know what that is. If it says CMA, they'd just be like, I don't know. That's how I'll have to ask them, or they just write it off as nothing. So that's my perspective. Again, you guys may have a different opinion on that from what you guys see.
No, I would agree with that. A lot of the clients that we work for, they have transition and turnover at their companies as well, and they look for to us for help in filling positions. And oftentimes when they're filling out the job criteria for the position, they say, "Oh, we need a new CFO. We want them to be a CPA."
Yeah.
See CPA a lot
A lot.
in terms of criteria, but not as many references to CMA.
Well, that's a really good point. When I took my position at United, my boss, Rick, he had a really narrow focus on what he wanted. He really wanted somebody with a CPA and an MBA. And he was like dead set, like, I'm going to find the guy that's got both. And thankfully I did. And so I fit that. He's like, well, you got these 2 designations that I really, really want. And he was the same way. He had both. He had a CPA and MBA. So he really valued that. And you're right. I mean, all the job postings that we do, certainly for when I was over accounting and finance, we'd always say, CPA preferred. If they came in with a CMA, great. I know what that is, and others do too. But you're right. You do tend to see that. So, Jesse, sorry, I'll get you next, Derek.
I was just wondering, these in finance, what's some of their methods to hedging that risk?
Interest rate risk or FX risk? Or both. So, that's a great question. So I'll go back to, what the bank model is, you go give the bank all your cash, they take that cash and make loans with it. So they don't really, what they can do is they can control the risk. If they give you a loan at, let's say, 5% on your house, and they may pay me, 0.1% on my deposits. So they got this giant spread in between these 2 rates of the cash that came in. And they can control that pretty well. It's going to take a lot of banks saying, oh, come deposit your money with me, I'll give you, 2% for that to really move the margin. But for us, it's different. We don't take deposits. So we rely on the equity of the company, which is pretty substantial. But we also have these credit facilities with banks. So banks actually lend to us because they can't really do what we do. However, they recognize we're a 50-year-old company, extremely strong, leverage, equity, all these things. They say, well, we think basically you're a good investment to lend to. So we'll lend to you at an extremely low rate, which is a variable rate, and then we tend to lend at fixed rates. So this is where the hedging comes in. So our customers, you may want to lease a fleet of vehicles, and I give you, let's say, a rate of 5%. Let's say my cost of funds is 2%, but it's variable. So as the Fed raises rates, I'm going to make less and less money on this deal. And let's say it's a 3-year deal, and the Fed raises rates 5 or 6 times. All of a sudden, I'm not making any money. So often, what my finance team will do is they'll look at the longer-term exposure deals. So especially if you had a 6, 7, 8-year long lease or loan with us, we would enter a derivative contract with one of our banks, and it's called an interest rate swap. So I don't know if you guys cover this at all in your classes. I sure didn't when I was in college. It was sort of new to me when I got out in the field. But basically what the bank will do is they say, okay, today you're paying, let's say it's 2% variable. We will essentially lock in this interest rate to fixed at something larger usually. Let's say it's 3%. Then I know on your deal I've made a 2% spread for the life of that contract. I've kind of locked that in. So the interest rate markets are driven by, a lot of things. They're always changing, but that's the way we eliminate that risk. So what happens is each month we'll pay the bank 3%, and they'll pay us whatever the variable is. And so oftentimes early in a contract, it costs you money, but typically if rates rise like you would expect, they're paying you money towards the end of that contract to make up for that. If that makes sense. That's a very quick, high level. Yeah, it typically you look at it and it's sort of, I look at it as an insurance policy. And how often do you wreck your car? How often does your house catch on fire? Not super often. How often do you beat the Vegas odds? Not really very often. However, do you sleep better at night knowing that you're insured? Yeah, you probably do. So that's where, and we've won on swap contracts, quite a bit. We've changed our methods of how we swap and how we structure, and we've won more often. But certainly early on in the company, when we first started swapping, it was very, very hard to win on it. When I say win, I mean you're going to make more money on that contract than you're going to pay back to the bank. To me, that's a win. Or if you break even, honestly, that's probably a win. So yeah, it's they're kind of challenging beasts. We analyze those every month, or more so often probably. So Derek, you had a question?
I was just curious, what do you think maybe is one thing you've retained from your time here at USI that's translated the most and something you still utilize in your job now?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, one of the things that I learned, certainly discipline probably. I wasn't super disciplined coming out to USI. I was sort of lucky or I feel lucky now. At the time, I'm not sure how I felt, but I was able to run cross country and track for USI when I came out here for 4 years, and that certainly instilled a lot of discipline in me, getting up early, doing pool workouts, running early. Sort of at the time, I was like, why am I doing this? This just feels like another job, it's exhausting. But I look back on that now, and that just really helped me in my career be more disciplined, be more organized. And what I learned also coming to USI was it's not easy. I mean, it's not an easy school. It's not an easy program. I had to really focus in, organize my life much more to get the projects done, the homework done, get the studying in. Kind of one of the neat things I learned as well, this helped me a lot for the CPA exam, was my study style, if that makes sense, or my learning style. And what I learned is, and you guys, I don't know, what I was taught younger is you just take notes. Like you're in high school and take a bunch of notes on history or whatever it is, and you'll be tested on this. And so that's what you do, is you sit there and you take a bunch of notes. And for most people, that's great. But for me, I found that what I was doing is I was just sitting and literally writing down things they were saying and not even thinking about them or not absorbing them. So what I started doing, I'm not sure how I was maybe lazy one day, but sitting in accounting class, I was just like, I'm just not going to take notes. I'm just going to listen. And I just sort of started doing that for a while. And what I learned was that I really started retaining the information. I really was trying to think about it as they were teaching it, so I could kind of turn around and ask questions more so on the fly. And because of that, my grades started getting a lot better. I didn't have to study as much. I didn't have to go back and read through a bunch of notes that I'm like, man, I don't even remember what the professor was talking about. I wrote all these things down. They don't make sense. And so again, I don't encourage that for if you are a note taker and that works for you, keep doing that. Don't stop doing that. But for the CPA exam, is that example. At the time, Becker gave me a bunch of books, and he also got like the videos to watch. And so honestly, I just put the books on a shelf and never even looked at them. I just sat there and watched the videos and just tried to let it soak in, did a bunch of practice questions, and it worked for me. And people would always say, I can't believe you didn't read the books. Like, this is crazy. You know, how can you not read the books and pass the exam? And I said, well, that's just not how I learn very well. You know, I can do that if I have to, but it's not as efficient for me. So I've tried to carry that into my career a bit. I do take notes at work, for sure I do. There's a lot of information coming at you, but I try to limit that somewhat to the key things I really need to follow up on later. So just a little bit of personal management, I guess. Yeah. Anybody else have a good question? Ask anything, yeah, all right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks again for coming out. Really appreciate it. That pretty much does it. Does the sign-up sheet come around? Yeah. Okay, did it get to everyone? Did everyone get a chance to sign up? Good. All right, well, if you didn't, I'll have it. So, other than that, that's all we got for today. So, thanks for coming. And Matt, again, thanks for coming out. Appreciate it.